few years ago, when director Shuko Murasi and writer Yasuyuki Muto worked on the adaptation of the novel Hathaway's Flash, I think they realised they had a problem. You see, it's actually a trilogy of novels, and this project will supposedly be a trilogy of films, each corresponding to one of those books. But it really is a single story, each novel picking up immediately after the last. And the first novel doesn't really have a conclusion or even a major climax. There's a big set piece, yes, a civilian POV battle, but it comes at the middle of the text. And there's a concluding battle between Hathaway and a rival pilot, but it's really short, just a few pages. And by design, it's something of an anticlimax. So to work as a film, there needed to be something that would say to the audience, this is the conclusion. This is the end of the film, either emotionally or narratively. Ideally, too, there would be some kind of an arc for our main character. But this is another major problem. A very major part of these books is that Hathaway doesn't really develop, per se. It's a tragedy, and Hathaway is, like any tragic hero, done in by his fatal flaw. In this case, that fatal flaw is his inability to separate his identity as political instrument from his identity as a human being. So, the story of Hathaway's Flash. It's convoluted in typical Gundam ways, but let me give it a shot. Years after Char's rebellion, Hathaway is now secretly a member of an anti-government organization called MAFTI. He and the rest of MAFTI are planning to assassinate Federation politicians while they meet in Australia to discuss new legislation. In order to get to Earth, Hathaway takes an elite Federation ship down to the planet, the same one carrying the aforementioned Federation politicians. When he gets to Earth, he'll join with his anti-government rebels and carry out the operation. Something very big goes wrong, however. Said plane is hijacked by a group of MAFTI copycats. Hathaway, along with a Federation officer named Kenneth, help fight back against the hijackers. But because of the incident, plans are changed. The ship has to land in the Philippines rather than Australia, and because of the incident, the Federation police ask if Hathaway can stay in an elite hotel in the city just while they figure out exactly what's gone on. So it's a freak coincidence. Those pretenders weren't actually MAFTI, but this is also the last thing Hathaway needs. He now has all these eyes on him when what he wants to do is slip away and join the rest of MAFTI forces. What ends up transpiring over the course of the film is that Hathaway is given several opportunities to slip away, engineered by MAFTI, but because of a brief entanglement he's made with this girl, Gigi, who is no one important in the grand scheme of things really, she's just a Federation escort essentially, Hathaway keeps losing his chances to slip away. This is his fatal flaw. Hathaway wants to turn himself into an arm of political violence, a capable, rigid arbiter of justice against the Federation. But he's also sentimental, making the same mistakes in his personal life over and over again, becoming attached to people who drag him away from his duties. So, what is the new conclusion they create for the film? Well, it's something very subtle, but it's kind of a meditation on exactly this. Towards the end of the third act, we get a monologue from Hathaway, one added for the film, that slightly reframes his actions in the narrative. It turns out that Hathaway never even had to take that Federation shuttle that was hijacked, causing the conflict of the film. He could have just travelled with his MAFTI compatriots to Earth, but he wanted to take that flight. He wanted to do it so he could see the faces of the Federation politicians he was going to kill. It was a sentimental act, basically. If Hathaway was going to pull the trigger and take human lives for a greater purpose, he wanted to have spent time with those people. It's a very mecha genre plot point. In the mech, it's easy for violence to be distant. You pull the trigger, which causes your robot to pull its own trigger, and that will take lives. Hathaway wanted to close that distance, to breathe the same air as the people he would kill. As Hathaway says, the thing that brought about this situation was my naivety, and now that's exposed everyone to danger. His desire to make this act personal, to use political violence as a means of giving himself closure for his own trauma, is what the narrative hinges upon. And this, beyond the final mecha fight of the film, which is abbreviated and anticlimactic in nature, this is the real emotional climax of the story. The music cuts out, and we only hear Hathaway's breathing over his monologue. What Hathaway says at the end of this monologue is that if his emotions are undermining his actions, then he'll just fully change. fully become Mafdi Navu Erin rather than Hathaway. It's all about mechanizing himself, turning himself from a person into a weapon, his identity subsumed into a Gundam. And the conclusion of this scene, as he descends to Earth, and for a moment it seems as if his metallic exoskeleton will burn up in the atmosphere, is a brief shot of Amuro's lifeless, dead body, as he says, "The Grim Reaper won't come when you're ready for him." The 2004 Tetsujin 28 has a claim to being maybe my favourite television anime ever. If I'm looking for that top spot, it's going somewhere between Dear Brother, Evangelion, and this. It is an adaptation of the very first mecha manga. It's also a meditation on the post-war period. Tetsujin is a remnant of the Imperial era, and he's named 28 because he's one in a long line of other robots and monsters made by Japanese scientists in that period, that boy detective Shotaro and his team must go about vanquishing. A typical episode of the series uses some sort of monster as tragic metaphor to explore an aspect of the post-war period. It's a series that is melancholy, melodramatic, quiet, and operatic all at the same time. It's directed by Yasuhiro Imagawa, someone who cannot help but be an auteur. Everything he touches, even though it's usually an adaptation, becomes distinctly his own. But usually his works are bombastic and maximalist. Tetsujin 28 has elements of that, but it's really a very small and quiet story about a Japan that is in itself in a state of rebuilding. There's a lot of just little living in this, with narration that fills in detail about the day-to-day life of Japan in decades after World War II. The episodes I'm about to discuss are some of my favourite in the series, which consequently makes them some of my favourite episodes in anime as a whole. If you have any intention to watch Tetsujin 28, like if any of this sounds good to you at all, please stop the video and just watch the show. I have brainworms for a lot of series, but there's few that I actually think are as rewarding and well constructed as this series. So, if you're still with me, we're discussing episode 15, Franken's Assistant, and episode 16, Kyoto Burns. These episodes are concerned largely with Kyoto and its status as an unchanging city, one that was largely untouched by the war. Kyoto was famously initially one of the cities that the Truman administration planned to drop the atomic bomb on. Truman was eventually convinced to change the bombing location. This was partially because it was felt that Kyoto was so prized by the Japanese population for its religious shrines and architecture that decimating it might make it harder to prevent the Japanese from allying with the Russians in the post-war period. Also, the person who made the recommendation to change the bombing site, Henry Stimson, had honeymooned in Kyoto, which some say partially fueled the change. So these episodes are a meditation on Kyoto as a place of stasis, and it uses this to tell a story of regret and the way a life can drift away from you over time. It's also very much a winter story. There's this moment early on when the characters are on a train to Kyoto, and there's some very cute details here, like Tetsujin getting his own cart at the back of the train. But there's also this moment where two characters are talking and they're drinking whiskey, passing the flask back and forth. And you get the sense that, oh, they're doing this to keep warm. It creates a sense of this brisk cold that hangs over the episodes. So there's many ins and outs to the narrative here, but I'll simplify it as much as possible. It focuses on Professor Shikishima. Shikishima is one of the main characters of the series, one of the older scientists who worked on the Tetsujin project. And he's kind of the most normal man in the cast, this fatherly figure, one of respect and authority and kindness. Shikishima is married with a wife and child, but we never really see them in the series. And we learn in this episode that he had a previous marriage during the war in Kyoto. In this story, after a series of strange AI robot murders, he seems to glimpse an image of his wife, who he thought dead, now a nun in Kyoto. So he and Shotaro go to Kyoto to investigate these murders, but also, on his part, to track down his wife. And he does, but she claims not to remember anything from that period, saying that she has amnesia. And much of the story is basically his attempt to reconnect with her. So let's break down some of these scenes between the two. In this one, Shikishima tries to conjure memories from the past by playing an old record they used to listen to. Director Imagawa often uses opera as a refrain in his work, and here it's O mio babino caro, a love aria. As Shikishima talks about their relationship together, the screen doors behind them open, and the scenery outside changes from a drab winter scene to cherry-blossomed summer, the memories of their time literally leaking into the room. He describes how extroverted she was, how she would hold his arm in public, even though that was looked down on at the time, and how at one point, when they were hassled by military police, she held up a book and pretended the two were involved in an intense academic debate. So this real sense of warmth between the two, and this real love that he had for her. Afterwards, we cut to them walking through a graveyard in the shrine in which Ayako is a nun. We are abruptly back to a winter scene of the present day, and it's a lateral tracking shot. Each time the camera moves past a Buddhist statue, the statue is used as a kind of screen wipe, bringing us closer spatially to the couple. We hear their conversation, but it's non-synchronous, happening sometime before this scene. In the conversation, she explains that she now has a child, and he explains that he has a family, and we see their blank expressions as they walk forward. It heightens the distance between them, the blocking and scenery communicating what has been lost in their relationship. So once again, if you have any plans to watch this series, skip past here, because I will explore the big reveal. Some of it. I'm not going to get into the full sci-fi minutiae of the plot, which by design has a lot of convoluted elements, but I'm going to discuss the big emotional beats. What the story ends up hinging on is the realization that Ayako has a vendetta against the city of Kyoto. After the war, she had to travel back from Tokyo, which was decimated by firebombings. When she finally arrived, she saw that Kyoto was totally untouched, frozen in time. Meanwhile, she had lost her child. Filled with rage at Kyoto, she swore to destroy it. And now, in the present day, she has her own big robot child, and she'll use it to enact revenge on a city which showed no recognition for her suffering. As she says to Shikishima at the climax of the story,
じゃあ、あなたは何とも思わないの？この街を見て、この何も変わらない京都を見て。でも私たちは変わった。いえ、東京も日本もみんな変わった。戦争っていう不幸の力で無理やり。で、どうしてこの街だけ変わらないの？
This episode ends with a set piece that is rendered in Imagawa's signature operatic, melodramatic style. It's a scene that I would use to illustrate his entire directorial vision. Ayako stands at the top of her shrine as the aria plays that she and Shikishima used to listen to. The robot that she's used to enact vengeance on Kyoto moves towards her, calling out to its mother, and she raises her arms in turn. As the aria reaches its peak, she's crushed by this falling robot, while Shikishima asks, what was it all for? What were the past 10 years for? And we understand that despite his wife and child, for the past 10 years he, like Kyoto, has been frozen in time, yearning for Ayako. The aria reaches its peak while the giant robot falls on its mother, and then there's a pause. In the final scene of the episode, Shikishima sits at his family inn with his mother. It's tranquil and birds are chirping. His mother remarks that the inn will never change, but comments, you can always count on the seasons coming and going. And Shikishima responds, yes, that's true. The end music starts playing, but it's not the usual ending theme of the series. It's this chipper, nostalgic tune. The song is an instrumental version of a pop ballad from 1971, titled, Even So, You're Still Going to Kyoto. That final ending theme is one last barb for the audience, a reminder that despite this tragedy, the world around Shikishima will keep going. It mirrors Ayako returning to Kyoto, having experienced apocalyptic suffering and encountering a society that shows no recognition for it. At its heart, this is a story about past regrets. We don't ever see Shikishima's family. They're a phantom in this narrative. This was the story of his true love. And as he says in the episode's climax, what was I doing for 10 years? What was the point of it all? So it's a story about a lot of things. It's about stasis, and it's about regret, and it's about family, and it's about obligation. And it's about how, amid all the change of politics and war, your life can just ebb away from you, while you just, like Shikishima, keep quiet withheld by politeness and duty. You can lose your one true shot at love, but because of expectation and repression, you'll ultimately have to sit back and say, well, the seasons do change, don't they? And all in a show named after this goofy, cute robot. The Zeta Gundam compilation movies were made decades after the original show. Like many compilation films, they feature some scenes of new animation, but because of their gap between their making, the new footage here stands out massively. It's peppered throughout each film, and the sense of disjuncture between the two styles means these compilations can basically only be enjoyed as an oddity, almost more interesting as a stylistic experiment than a fully fledged narrative film. Having said that, the new footage is gorgeous, and it becomes an interesting exercise in what they choose to reanimate in these beautifully detailed scenes. It's like an act of canonization, choosing which of the moments from the original show deserve to be rendered in a new hyper-reality. When Amuro and Char meet again, for instance, it's rendered with an almost religious fervor. This is what closes out the first film, and it's clear we're meant to take our own narrative baggage of how we know their relationship concludes into this new version of the scene. The scenes they reanimate are interesting, but for me, by far the best ones are those fully created for these films. For example, at the start of movie 2, we get this scene of all our protagonists running down to their hangar together. It's beautifully animated, and we also get a sense of each character just from how they move. I love that Camille does his move with the railing, for instance. However, most of the new animation is very fragmentary, beginning and ending so abruptly that they don't really fully lodge themselves in your brain or become coherent dramatic moments in their own right. However, there's one of these new scenes that has fully lodged its way into my subconscious, and I think its inclusion is actually a big improvement on the original series. The final episode of Zeta Gundam is this torrent of anger and death and battle. Zeta isn't really a major show for me, I'm not really a big fan of it as a whole, but I think the last stretch of episodes are excellent. They're intense and dramatic, and really give you the sense of this battlefield where people are just losing it. In the movie, after this huge chaotic battle concludes, we cut to Earth, where a bunch of the cast from the original show are monitoring the battle at an observatory. When they realize the battle has ended in the AUG's favor, we get a scene of Mirai driving around looking for a Federation base. It's not totally clear what is going on here. I suppose they're probably essentially wanting to be at a Federation outpost to see how the situation develops. But we get this scene where Mirai stops on the side of the road at a farm. There's a chicken farmer feeding her chickens, and Mirai asks her if she knows where the Federation base is. The chicken farmer, though, doesn't look up. She doesn't even respond. It's like she's not even heard Mirai. Mirai looks a bit perplexed and then drives off. And the scene holds on the chicken farmer, who, still going about her duties, yawns. In a movie where they had to choose so sparingly what they were going to reanimate, I love that they gave us this. It's not a battle. It features no set piece. It's the calm after the storm. It's a moment of peace that allows the audience to decompress after what we've seen. And more than that, for the past half an hour, we've been caught up in this chaotic space battle. We've seen different people state their ideologies, their vision for the future, and their plans to change the lives of millions of people. We've seen our protagonists in their big robot toys battle and scream and shout. And the battle has turned a particular way. The conflict is done. But this whole time, down on Earth, people have been going about their regular lives, no idea that a battle has been raging, while the lives of all of humanity are decided by people with fancy clothes and even fancier robots. The small people still have to go about their business. Someone on Earth still has to feed the chickens.